It's now time for Energy Insights, where you get an inside view and local perspective of all the oil and gas progress going on in the Mid-Ohio Valley. This program is brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association and can be heard every Saturday at 9 a.m. on WMOA AM 1490, FM 101.3, JAWS Country FM 100.9, and ESPN Radio AM 630 and FM 92.9. Here's Johnny Wharf, your local host.
Saturday morning means Energy Insights, a chance to learn a little bit about the oil and gas industry, brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Johnny Wharf along with Kevin Rothenbuhler with Utica Resource Operating, and right out of the gate, our listeners are saying, Utica Resource Operating, right? So tell us a little bit about the business.
Sure. Thanks for having me, John. We became a business in 2018, early April. We bought some old assets off of a company by the name of PDC Energy. They were exiting the area, the Appalachian Basin, as far as operations are concerned, and they put their assets up for sale.
All right. Well, obviously somebody doesn't say, I'm going to do that, right? You have to have some background, so let's go there now.
Sure. So when the company put, or you mean my background?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So my background is I'm originally from up around Woodsfield, Ohio, Monroe County. I went to River High School, graduated from Marietta College with a petroleum engineering degree, worked offshore for about a year and a half out of Lafayette, Louisiana, a little town known as Broussard with Baker Hughes Intech. Moved back to the Northeast, had jumped around Pittsburgh, West Virginia. Actually went to work for PDC Energy, and they moved me here to Marietta. And then when they sold the assets, I started on with the new company.
So your desire as you get moved back to come back to where you grew up, would that be safe to say, or you just came back here because they said go back there?
No, I think there's always I think everybody always wants to get back home, right? And I think that's what hit me after the year and a half working offshore. At the time, Utica, Marcellus, none of that was really in play.
Sure.
So when I got back into Pittsburgh and worked up around Pennsylvania and West Virginia, I thought that was probably about as good as I was going to get. But then when some of the companies discovered the Utica and I had an opportunity to get back here in Marietta, I was on that train.
All right, I'm going to stay here for a minute because I think the listeners are particularly interested in the idea that young people, and they can't tell because we're on the radio that you're a young person, but that young people come back to the area. It's kind of always been that thing, man, if we could just get, and there's so many opportunities, that kind of thing. Sure. And so talk a little bit about being here, having been in a bigger market or a couple bigger markets, if you're talking Pennsylvania, Louisiana, and the things you like, the things maybe you don't like.
Sure. No, honestly, working offshore, I think most of the questions I get from people is about working offshore and how big the equipment is and how the scheduling is different and how you got to, everything is delivered to that platform or whatnot. When I moved back here from the Gulf, I was in the conventional market. So there was a big difference. The guys were spending $15-20 million on wells. The companies were. Now I was on the service side, so it was a small piece of that. Moving back here, getting into the conventional market, we were spending at the time about $300,000 per well, and we were drilling wells every 3 to 4 days. So it was just wildly different. The production is different, of course, but it's just a completely different mindset. It's the amount of money you spend. I wouldn't say waste, but they step over the amount of money we were spending on entire wells here, at least at the time. Now with the Utica and the Marcellus development first, obviously before the Utica, things changed here in the Northeast. So we've got a lot more of that mentality. I wouldn't say that we waste money by any means, but the spend has changed dramatically.
All right, Kevin Rothenbuhler is our guest, and he is with Utica Resource Operating. We've only had a chance to get to meet him today. I want to learn more about the business, but here we are already through our time for today. So we'll have him back next week. We'll get to meet his family a little bit as well, and that's going to do it for today. We thank the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. This is Energy Insights. Energy Insights on a Saturday morning, and a second opportunity to sit down with Kevin Rothenbuhler. He is with Utica Resource Operating right here in Marietta, and we talked a little bit about your background, the fact that you're from the area, Woodsfield, and then been around all over the country in the oil and gas business. At some point, you have to say, you know what, I want to run my own business. So talk about the venture into owning this business and maybe some of the details from that.
So the company Utica Resource Operating is actually pretty much primarily, we do have an investment backer, but it is employee owned. The employees do own a stake in the business. So depending on the business model, and I don't want to get into Utica specifically, but this is kind of a thing for the oil and gas industry on the private equity side. A lot of the employees end up owning a portion of the business, and then depending on the business model, whether it's to build it up and then sell the production, build it up, prove up some acreage, and then flip it, kind of a common thing. And then the employees typically get a piece at the end, either during the sale or after the sale in an override fashion.
All right, Johnny Wharf along with Kevin Rothenbuhler. Utica Resource Operating is the business, and I would like to get into Utica as it relates to the shale, because we hear that, Marcellus Shale and Utica Shale, right? Those are the two things that we've talked about, and we've educated the listener, and yet here I am doing the show every week, and I still need to be reminded what the difference is, I guess.
Sure. So they're just two different formations. The Marcellus is a shale as well as the Utica Shale. They're just different layers in the rock formations, essentially. Tends to be the Marcellus is more marketable north of here, Monroe County, over Washington County, Pennsylvania, New Martinsville area in West Virginia, a lot in the northeast corner of Pennsylvania, and then the Utica just has a different barrier. The Utica formation seems to be primarily Ohio. There is some parts of West Virginia and Pennsylvania that is productive. But the Utica seems to be anywhere from Guernsey County, Belmont, Harrison County, Monroe County as well. Seems to be the primary area.
Utica Resource Operating, horizontal drilling. So talk about the process there as well. And again, it sounds like we know what that means, but maybe you can take us a little deeper on that.
Sure. So basically we drill horizontal to get more wellbore in contact with the formation. It changes our economics dramatically. Obviously, if you just pierce the formation vertically, you only get the thickness. If you drill the curve and lateral and into the formation and you drill horizontally, it can be as long as your lateral is. So that increased contact increased the economics of our wells, but it also about doubles the risk. So I kind of have a childlike affinity for what we do on the drilling side. Is just kind of incredible. But we are primarily a Utica Shale operator.
All right. So as far as that childlike affinity, I wanted to ask you this in our first show, and I forgot to, so I don't want to forget it. And that is the piece that I saw on your desk when I was walking out front. Looked like a really old, not fossil, but an old operating tool, right? Sure.
Yeah, I have some wooden, what they call sucker rods in the industry, and what that is actually on one of your previous shows you talked to Jared Stevens about a pump jack, and those wooden rods are from an early 1900s well that connect the rod pump that goes down in the wellbore that pumps the oil out up through the tubing to the pump jack that everybody sees on the surface moving up and down. Essentially, those rods used to be made out of wood because steel was so expensive and hard to come by at the time. they obviously had to have threads to connect those. So the ends of the rods are steel, and they connect the steel to the wooden rods, and then the threads are in the steel, of course. And because they're in oil, they basically get petrified, and they really don't rot anymore. So I think Brian Chavez provided that to Sugo. They auctioned it off. I ended up buying it, but just a nice plaque and just kind of a tie that's ties us back to the old production and some of the history of the oil field.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And behind my desk in my office, which you haven't been in, which maybe you will someday, but I have the old 1941, not as old as your stuff, but 1941 Philco radio. The tubes have to warm up before it goes. But man, is it cool and bold and beautiful. And that is going to do it for our program today, Energy Insights. Our guest has been Kevin Rothenbuhler. We'll have him back again. Utah Resource Operating is the business right here in Marietta, and this show brought to you each Saturday by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Saturday morning and Energy Insights is the program brought to you each and every Saturday at this time on all 5 of our radio signals by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. We've had an opportunity over the last couple of weeks to learn a little bit about Kevin Rothenbuhler and his business, which is Utica Resource Operating. I want to jump back, if we can, Kevin, to the horizontal drilling part of it. I'd mentioned in a previous program that you're a young guy, back, having grown up in the area, working in this oil and gas industry. And I want to, touch on the technology part of it, meaning when you got into the business compared to when horizontal came in, or was it in, or how that happened, and maybe the timeline thereof.
So horizontal drilling started in the, I believe in the early 90s in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I can't think of the formation right now, and I apologize for that. But it's primarily, you just increase the rock volume that you're in touch with the well bore, so it increases the economics. But essentially, you have what's called a mud motor. And what that has is at the very, very end of it, the last foot right before the bit, a drill bit, it has a little bend in it, a slight bend, like about 1.5 degrees or so, maybe 2 degrees. And they can orient that based with basically a 30-foot computer inside of a tool joint, inside of a tool. And once they orient that bend, that mud motor will actually set and spin the drill bit without turning the pipe. As you pump fluid down through it. And then you just build a few degrees every 100 foot, and pretty soon you're out 90 degrees. Some of the technology that has been derived from that is actually what's called rotary steerable, and there's a few different designs in the market, but basically they're able to push the bit one way or the other as they're rotating the pipe. And you can imagine turning the pipe, 150, 200 RPMs, they can drill way faster, and they can make a lot more hole in a 24-hour period.
And what exactly are we looking for? We've talked about dry gas, wet gas. Is there, what is it specifically? Are you doing both?
Oh yeah, it's either. It's any horizontal well uses that technology to drill. Utica Resource Operating, we're primarily in the oil window. Not really. Now we do get gas. We also produce natural gas, but not the volumes that you hear about from Belmont County or even over in Washington, Pennsylvania.
I'm just thinking about, if that first horizontal drill was in the 90s, I can only imagine and you talked about being able to see this on a computer screen, but talk about the transformation of that visual and information that you're getting.
Well, the information really hasn't changed. The tools have adapted to go into the horizontal well bores, and how they measure is pretty much the same. That technology hasn't changed because of it. But some of the neat stuff that has changed is some of the first few wells were only 1,100 foot horizontal or 2,500 foot horizontal, and even for us, we're a smaller company. We just finished a 6-well program, and we actually drilled a 17,000 foot lateral. Now that's just the lateral section. You add another 7,200 foot, 7,300 foot vertical, 400 to 500 foot curve, 600 foot curve. We finished right around 24,700, 25,000 foot total depth of the well. So to drill over 3 miles in the horizontal leg of a wellbore is just incredible to me, I guess, anyways. Granted, you're only drilling 8 3/4 hole, but it's just the technology is just incredible.
And so the continuing education part of your business, obviously you learned on the job and probably many different aspects that you worked in Lafayette or in Pittsburgh, but you got to learn something new every day, it sounds like, right?
Things change constantly. I got into the management side of the business probably 4 to 5 years ago, and even since Utica's, we went out and hired a drilling engineer because I came from the drilling side, and I was even so far behind in the last 4 to 5 years. It's just incredible.
All right. And do you anticipate going forward good things to come? Always talk about the area, how it's really hot, and then it's not, and you see a lot of white trucks, and then you don't. You see,
Sure.
different stuff like that.
As far as the market goes, everybody's predicting gas to stay up, natural gas to stay up. Everybody's predicting oil to stay up for the next 1.5 to 2 years. So I think the industry should have a good couple years moving forward, but I guess we'll see. It's always dictated by market.
All right. You do a good job on the radio, by the way. Kevin Rothenbuhler is our guest. He is with Utica Resource Operating, and this is Energy Insights on the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Energy Insights on a Saturday morning here on WMOA, WJAW, and ESPN Radio. Kevin Rothenbuhler is our guest. He is with Utica Resource Operating right here in Marietta, and we've talked for several weeks here about the business, about horizontal drilling, and about some of the places and people that you've worked for. And I'd like to maybe, if you could expound a little bit on the people you meet in the industry. And as a young guy, are there a lot of other young people getting into it? Is it something that you're trying to recruit young people into the oil and gas industry, or is that part of what you even do?
No, we're always looking for younger people. I mean, just like any business, most of our investment goes into the people and people's salaries and training and whatnot, and we're always looking for younger people because the money seems to get us a little bit further. We're not. The other thing that we're running into is back in the 80s, when oil and gas was a little bit scarce, the industry was kind of on a decline, and the companies back then weren't real busy. We have this age gap now in the oil and gas industry where a lot of the guys that remained in the oil field through the 80s, they're in their 60s, early 60s, maybe even 70s right now, and we're missing that 10 to 15 year gap. So a lot of the younger guys, myself and a little bit younger, are having to step up and fulfill roles that traditionally weren't filled until you're in the mid to late 40s. And those guys are just retiring now. They have the want and the need and the financial stability to get out. So a lot of the younger guys are having to step up because we're missing, I want to say a generation, but it's not really a generation. It's about a 10 to 15 year window.
When you have a chance to sit back like I'm forcing you to do right now and get out of the business and think more about on the business in terms of the people that you've met or the different things along the way, now that you're the business owner, what you're doing here, when you look back and think about how you got here?
It has been interesting, and I reflect on this a good bit actually when I'm at the house, and I've been very fortunate to have very good people that I've worked for and have very good mentors, and I've just been very lucky and very fortunate to be in the right time, at the right spot at the right time, and have the right people. And just for example, when Utica Resource Operating formed and we took over these assets from PDC Energy, I was very fortunate to already have a good team in place that PDC Energy had hired. And we just kept the same team right in place the entire team is very familiar with the assets, very familiar with each other, and very, very high performing team.
In terms of 2 degrees of separation, off air, you brought up Mike Marshall, and that's somebody you had worked for, and this was a guy that I had interviewed, and his son works for me. So this is the world we live in, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, the oil industry is such a small world, and we run into people all the time. I've run into people that I've worked offshore with here in the Northeast. It's a very, very small world. The oil and gas industry, the people tend to float and hit different companies, and we're an odd industry, in my opinion, just because we're led by a bunch of engineers and geologists, and we're not the best communicators out there. I mean, we're meant to sit in the background and kind of fix problems and design stuff, and we don't get out into the public eye very much. So I think it's hard to keep those communications rolling. But we do seem to run into the same people and the same in the industries. I mean, we're constantly doing the same stuff and over and over and over. It's as much as drilling these wells, it turns into a factory. And even though one guy might be perforating with this company today, in 2 or 3 months, that company might have disappeared, and he might be perforating for another company. So his expertise is his expertise, and we just pull from the same talent pool for all that stuff.
So as far as the folks that work with you in your business specifically, I know we're going to talk to Maureen. She might let me call her Mo next week. So we're going to talk to her on the show a little bit as well. But talk a little bit about your staff and how that's working for you.
Sure. So we have landmen that deal with our landowners, our royalty owners. We have 2 engineers that one primarily focuses on the drilling side, one primarily focuses on the completion side or the hydraulic fracturing. I have a production guy that just looks over production, and he manages all of our well tenders or pumpers. Some people call them pumpers. We have Mo. She's our EHS person. She kind of oversees our safety and runs our safety program and any type of spill or maintenance or anything like that. Also in charge of our air quality stuff. We have a few technicians that work for us just with data entry and that's primarily my team. We do have some others. We have a vice president of geology, vice president of business that runs all of our land stuff. We have a controller that takes care of all the accounting stuff, but I'm primarily on the operations side.
Yeah. Well, pretty much all you have took me about down 10 different roads I didn't realize. So that's good. And that's what we try to do each week here is learn a little something about somebody. Thank you for letting us inside a little bit, if you will, of your business. Utica Resource Operating is the business. Kevin Rothenbuhler is our guest. This is Energy Insights brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Energy Insights on a Saturday morning, a chance to learn a little bit more about a local business, Utica Resource Operating. Kevin Rothenbuhler has been so kind to let us in on the inside, if you will, of the business, and we've talked a little bit about the Utica Shale, the horizontal drilling, and the idea that Kevin has been to a lot of places, including the Gulf, and including part of the Shale Crescent region, if you will, in terms of working in different aspects of the industry. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about the horizontal drilling process, because I think people are intrigued to the point that they want to learn more about it, and maybe you can let us in on. I feel like you said first one was in the 90s, but it seems like just in the last 10 years is when it really kind of took off, at least around here, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the Marcellus Shale, there's companies out there that have claimed to be the discoverer of it, and I'm wanting to say the Marcellus was right around 2007. I believe the Utica dates back to about 2011, 2012. And my understanding is how it was discovered was a company was drilling a vertical well in Belmont County for water disposal. They logged the formation vertically across the face, and whether they did a drill stem test or tested the flow out of it just while the drilling rig was sitting there, or they compared the logs from the Utica to the Marcellus and claimed that the logs looked similar, that they decided to complete it and see what it would do production wise. And I think that was 2010, 2011, maybe 2012 for the Utica, and I think the Marcellus was around 2006, 2007. Now, there are some verticals dating, whenever I was going through PDC's records, there's some verticals that were completed in central West Virginia and the Utica, but they were very, very small jobs, and they really weren't, the jobs weren't big enough to unlock the potential at the time. So
you've explained that as well as anybody I've ever talked to explain it, just given the fact that the layman terms that I can understand. Actually, when you were talking about it, I thought about Jed Clampett, shooting the rabbit and the oil coming up, and lo and behold, here we are, right? Some years later. As far as the way that you moved through the industry, again, as a guy that got into it, did you work in the field for any period of time? I mean, right out of the gate, or how did you get started?
Oh, sure, yeah. So when I worked in the Gulf for about a year and a half right after graduation from Marietta College, I was with a service company for about a year and a half working offshore. When I came back after that in Pittsburgh, I flipped to an operator that we actually drilled our wells just like Utica Resource does. But I was in the field as a drilling engineer and completion engineer, and I was logging the wells, helping design where the casing got ran, where to complete them, where to complete the wells, the vertical wells, and then helping with kicking them off and then tying them in line. And I did that for probably 3 to 4 years. I came to work for a different operator. They were just getting into wanting to drill some of the Marcellus and Utica wells, Marcellus primarily, down in central West Virginia. We drilled some vertical wells, and right as the horizontal market was starting to take off in the Northeast, and that's what I actually did in the Gulf with the service operator, was I helped drill wells horizontally. And that technology was starting to come into the Northeast, and we applied that to some of the wells. And like I said in previous broadcasts, we were drilling 2,500-foot laterals, 4,000-foot laterals, and we thought we were just doing amazing. It was such a game changer. And with what we do now, it's what's seeming to happen is the laterals seem to get longer, and at this point we're talking about on the completion side not being able to complete as far as what we can drill efficiently, at least. Yeah. I mean, they can complete it, but just efficiently. Somewhere
back in the transition of you in the industry, you mentioned college, and we'd always used to say Marietta College is where you find petroleum engineering and baseball. That was kind of the thing. Maybe not fair for baseball because everything's coming up, including baseball is at the top of the heap when it comes to their specific sport or industry. Is it still the same in terms of Marietta College and petroleum?
I don't know. I think they turn out a lot of good students. I mean, being a liberal arts school, I think their education program's well touted. Their physician's assistant program's been very well received. I think it started up while I was there actually as a student. No, I think Marietta College turns out some pretty good students, very well rounded. I know that they're known for the petroleum engineering courses, and I think it's kind of neat to run into guys. I'll be in meetings and giant national SPE meetings and run into guys that were 80s and 90s graduates from Marietta College, and we have that fraternity like brotherhood, I suppose. But it's I think Marietta College is a very well rounded school for just a lot of different programs.
Kevin Rothenbuhler is our guest. Business is Utica Resource operating here in Marietta. The program's Energy Insights and brought to you each week by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Thank you, Kevin. And back at the same place, same time next week.
Thank you for listening to Energy Insights, brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Tune in every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on WMOA Local Radio, JAWS Country, and ESPN Radio, as Johnny Wharf brings you your local and inside perspectives going on in the oil and gas industry right here in the Mid-Ohio Valley.